Welcome back to the channel. As some of you may know, my daily driver for the last 2.5 years has been a 2017 Audi S3. The car's a lease, and the lease is due up in a few months, and so I thought I'd take this opportunity to give a review about real-world thoughts about the car, what I like about it, what I don't like about it, and just an overall perspective of someone who's lived with it for a couple years. Overall, I've been very happy with the car. It's been great for daily use. It's very practical, having 4 doors and a decent sized trunk in terms of taking kids places and running errands, running to the grocery store, and also serving as a daily commuter to and from work. Despite having 4 doors, the car is relatively small, which is an advantage. It's very maneuverable, easy in and out of traffic, and makes it easy to park, especially in busy urban environments, so that's definitely a plus. This car is a sister car to the VW Golf R. It shares the same drivetrain, the same 2-liter 4-cylinder turbocharged engine, the same 4-wheel drive system. The main differences being obviously the different body and slight differences in trim, and maybe a little bit more upscale trim levels for Audi compared to VW. One of my dislikes about the car is visibility in terms of blind spots. Over my left shoulder, as you can see, there's a B-pillar that's right in the way of needing to see traffic to my left. Part of that might be my height. I'm 6'2", so where I need to have the seat positioned for me puts the seat back a little bit further, but it's also just part of having a 4-door car being this relatively small, needing to have the doors that short. The B-pillar needs to be there. Obviously, if this were a coupe, the pillar would be further back and you'd have better visibility, but it is something to be aware of that is a little bit of an issue. Audi offers 2 trim levels for this car. There's the Premium Plus and the Prestige. This car is a Premium Plus. I didn't order this car. I ended up being lucky enough to locate one coming inbound to a dealer that was already built. The spec was very much how I would have spec'd it anyway. I like the Daytona gray pearl exterior paint was great because I wanted something that was a little bit stealth and not so flashy, especially for daily use. And I love the red interior in contrast with that gray exterior. However, this car was the lower trim level, which is the Premium Plus. And because of that, a couple things that are a little disappointing, especially in a car that's an Audi that you would expect to be more of a kind of a premium German luxury sedan. There is no home-link garage door opener system on this car in this trim level, which seems a little bit strange in this day and age for something that's probably so inexpensive for the manufacturer to put in the car. So unfortunately, you have to use the old-fashioned remote that came with your garage door opener. Along those lines, the car also lacks automatic tilt down of the side view mirror for parking. Again, another feature that is probably dirt cheap for manufacturers to include these days, but really makes a big difference in daily use of the car and practicality. When you're parallel parking, to be able to put it in reverse and automatically have that side view mirror go down so you can see where the curb is, so you don't curb your wheels. Instead, you have to manually adjust your mirrors during parking, which again is a little bit surprising in a car of this caliber. Another drawback of having the base level trim package on this car is it does not come with the nav system. It does have Apple CarPlay, which is interesting, so it syncs to your maps on your phone and also to Waze. And really, in this day and age, I think most people use Waze as opposed to their car's built-in nav system. So maybe not as much of a drawback. Overall, I like the gauge cluster in this car. This car is a 2017. It was just at the point when they were starting to release the newer Audi all-digital dash that's configurable, that can have navigation and allow you to completely customize what you have in the display, which is pretty neat. But this is the more traditional standard analog display. It's very clear. I like it. My only complaint about it is that it doesn't have a temperature gauge. It has a boost gauge down at the bottom of the tach, and at the bottom of the speedometer it has a fuel gauge, but there's no temperature gauge. Especially with a relatively high performance turbo engine such as this, it's pretty important to pay attention to engine temperatures and know that the car is up to operating temperature before you really start calling upon it to have performance and get higher into the rev range. So I would prefer it to have a temperature gauge, and disappointing that it doesn't. The engine stock is 292 horsepower and 280 pound-feet of torque, which is very decent from a 2-liter 4-cylinder. This engine, though, is very, very tunable. Plenty of companies in the aftermarket support tunes with this car, and even with a simple flash through the OBD port, you could get substantial increases in horsepower and torque. APR is one of the big names in tuning that supports this car, and also the VW Golf R variant. Through an OBD flash, without having to do anything to downpipes or turbos or any kind of mechanical changes, you can get an additional 80 or 90 horsepower and 100 pound-feet of torque just through the flash. So very, very impressive, and makes the car can make the car very, very, very fun and very, very responsive. The car actually sounds quite good, especially for a 4-cylinder turbocharged engine. Oftentimes, turbochargers end up muffling the sound of the exhaust, but with this car it manages to sound pretty good for a small 4-cylinder. One particular thing, an option of this car, is that it has the factory resonator delete, which is an option, removes rear resonator and allows for a little bit more sound. It's actually fooled some people. Some of my friends have thought that it's a special aftermarket exhaust, and in fact it's just a factory option to remove the resonator, and sounds pretty good. The ride handling compromise in this car is actually quite good. The ride is firm, as you would expect with an S3 or any S-level Audi, but bumps are soaked up pretty well. It really doesn't crash you around too much. A dual clutch transmission is the only transmission option for this car. Unfortunately, it's not available as a manual. If you want this drivetrain in this size of a car with a manual transmission, you would have to get its equivalent from VW, which is the Golf R, which essentially is the exact same engine, the same all-wheel drive system, but available with a manual transmission, which is a nice option. That being said, the dual clutch transmission in this car is quite nice. It's responsive. Compared to the dual clutch transmission in the BMW M3 that I had in 2011, this is much more responsive. It tends to predict what you're wanting much better. It's much more clairvoyant as to what you're about to do in terms of downshifting and holding gears. As you can hear there, it nicely downshifted from 4th to 3rd to 2nd in fairly rapid succession and very smoothly, in anticipation of me slowing down for a corner. Not quite sure why, but in my former BMW M3 from a few years ago, I would always drive it with the paddles in manual mode with the dual clutch transmission. With this car, 99% of the time I just leave it in automatic, in the sports setting, but in automatic, and let it do its own thing. Probably because this car just does a better job of that than the BMW did. More recent versions of BMW's dual clutch transmission might be better with that, but with the 2011, the E90 M3 that I had, it really was a lot smoother, or was a better experience for you to drive it in manual mode. My only complaint about this transmission, in terms of it being a DCT, is when it's in the sports setting, it tends to hesitate when you're going into a slow corner in a residential neighborhood. It does a second to first downshift as you're slowing down for a corner, and then it tends to get kind of caught out, or it gets a little flustered and hesitates as you then try to accelerate out of the corner. It shifts from second to first, and then kind of just stutters as you're trying to apply a little bit of power to accelerate out of the corner. Feels very awkward. It kind of feels like you threw a boat anchor out of the car, and it's an annoying feature that I wish it didn't have. Something that maybe a change in software programming would theoretically be able to fix. Another quirk of the car that can be a little bit annoying is a very sensitive stability control or traction control that ends up being an issue if you're accelerating away from a stop sign or a stoplight and there's rough pavement. The car can tend to cut power, sensing wheel slip, and right at the time that you need to be accelerating and getting into traffic, the car is cutting power. It feels very strange. You look down at the dash, at the gauge cluster, and you see the stability or traction control light flickering, and then you realize what's going on. So another thing that probably Audi could have programmed a little bit differently to be a little bit less intrusive, because it actually has real-world implications. One thing to be aware of that's interesting, this car, despite being an Audi, is not actually a Quattro. Its all-wheel drive system is based on the Haldex system out of Sweden. That's most likely because, again, most of the mechanicals of this car are shared with the VW Golf R platform. You need to go up to the S4 and on above in the Audi line to actually get true Quattro. So what does that mean? That means with this being a Haldex as opposed to a Quattro, it is more of front-wheel drive biased as opposed to a direct split or rear-wheel drive biased. They tried to do some tuning in later versions of this car and in the RS3 to make it a little bit more rear-wheel drive biased. But again, there are times when you're aware that this did start as basically a front-wheel drive platform. Reliability has been excellent. I've had no trouble with the car, aside from a couple rattles here and there. Actually, the rattle you hear in the back is some of my video equipment, but a couple rattles here and there. Other than that, no problems at all. I've changed the oil regularly and taken good care of it, and it's been great. As you can imagine, winter traction has been fantastic with this car, with its all-wheel drive, especially with winter tires, which I put on for each winter season. It's been pretty much unstoppable in the snow. I did a performance winter tire, Pirelli Soda 03s, which were excellent. There are other brands out there that are also good in this application. Here on Long Island, we get our share of snow, but certainly nothing like you would see in further up north or in Colorado or places like that. But in those locations, I'm sure the car does fantastic as well with proper winter tires. If you're familiar with the look of the standard Audi S3, you probably noticed that I made a couple aftermarket changes to the car. Let's take a look at those now. The couple of upgrades I did to the car include lowering springs and aftermarket wheels. The springs are 034 Motorsport springs from California. They're specific to the S3. Lower the car approximately 3/4 of an inch in front and 3/4 of an inch in back, improving looks and eliminating that fender gap, and maintaining the excellent ride handling, balance of stock, and working in conjunction with Audi's magnetic ride, which this car has. The wheels are OZ that I ordered from Tire Rack. I think they look great on the car. They're 19-inch like stock, but a little bit wider, which allow the use of 245 Michelin Pilot Sport 4S's all around, as opposed to the 235 that came stock on the car. Overall then, my 2.5-year experience with the Audi S3 has been quite positive. Aside from the disappointments that I mentioned with the lack of certain features in the Premium Plus trim level, which probably should have been included in a car of this level and this caliber, aside from those issues, I've been very, very happy. The car has been reliable, it's been fast, it's been fun, it's gotten me safely to and from work in all weather conditions, and just been very, very enjoyable. I will hate to see it go, but I'm looking forward to its replacement, definitely, which is an M2 competition, which should be a real blast. I'll get a video going for that once I take delivery of that and get some miles on it. So in the meantime, hit subscribe and stay tuned for more videos to come. See you later.